Welcome everybody. We are here today with two very special guests from Neptune DASH, Troy Wong and Cale Moodie, CEO and CFO of Neptune DASH. Tell me about this company. Tell me about this. You guys had an IPO recently. Tell me a little bit about Neptune DASH.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I'm actually a chartered accountant. I've been in finance and industry for about 10, 12 years now, focused on sort of speculative resource plays and focused on gold companies and other pubcos. I started following Bitcoin back in 2013 when it sort of made its first run from $100 in the summer to about $1,200, $1,300, and I had some very bright friends who told me to get into the space. At the time, I didn't really know what blockchain was, but I did see the opportunity in Bitcoin because it shared some of the fundamentals of gold, scarcity, and the algorithms it was quite unique and quite interesting. So. Then I started to learn a little bit more about blockchain. Funny enough, in 2013, I actually tried to start a company focused on blockchain. At that point in time, the environment just wasn't ready for it.
Sure.
It was more focused actually on Bitcoin and of course blockchain indirectly, but we couldn't even get a bank account at that time. So it was a really challenging time. Fast forward to this year, Troy and I met in the summer, and we had this view that we need to create vehicles that the public, that the retail investors can actually access the cryptocurrency markets without having to go through the rigmarole of actually setting up accounts, dealing with security, all this sort of stuff, because it's actually quite complex to do it. Not anybody can just go and set up an account, and if you're mom and pop, if you're 50 years old and you've never seen this technology before, how do you actually access these markets and these cryptocurrencies? So that's how we sort of came together, and we co-founded this company in the summer, and it's been a whirlwind ever since.
Very cool.
I got into blockchain actually in 2013. Living in Vancouver, I was working at a very prominent public natural resource company at the time. And if people remember, during the first sort of bull run in 2013, the US Congress had actually recently, they didn't approve Bitcoin or blockchain technology, but they had a formal hearing and they said that we were not going to do anything about it, and we were going to sort of let this innovation take place and sort of see what happens. And that was an absolute landmark moment in digital currency, where the price went from a little over $100 all the way up to 1,200 US dollars, I believe, in about 2 weeks. Wow. And at the same time, actually one of our directors, Jackson Warren, with Serendipity, had actually opened up the first ever Bitcoin ATM at a Waves coffee shop in Vancouver. Mm-hmm. And I remember walking down the street. And at this time, Bitcoin had a large enough following that was kind of in the news. And so it wasn't completely sort of offline in these sort of IRC chat channels that were happening. Bloomberg had started to kind of report on it. And it turns out our director opened the first, what we call BTM, or Bitcoin ATM in the world. And there was a lineup actually outside the block. Wow. Around the block, there was probably 20 or 30 people online for the first 2 weeks that Bitcoin ATM had opened. And at that point, no one knew how to buy Bitcoin. Mt. Gox was sort of like alive and kicking, but like that was the only exchange sort of in the world. And the only way to actually buy Bitcoin was through this BTM in Vancouver, per my Google search, which was my limited knowledge at the time. And so I basically took half my life savings and actually went down and fed it in cash to get my first actual few little Bitcoins, basically. And like a true sort of like newbie or new investor in this space, once the price sort of dropped off, I lost interest. But my claim to fame is that I always believe in Bitcoin and blockchain technology. I never sold any of my Bitcoin. I kept my hardware wallets basically in USB. I treated them as USB sticks, put them away in a safe, and I actually didn't do anything until basically January of 2017, with the price coming back and real interest in the space. It began to sort of reignite in the media and everything else. So that's how I got into the space initially in my first experience.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about the mission of Neptune DASH. You guys have built this company. It's based on Dash, the cryptocurrency, but what is the mission of the company? What are you guys trying to solve?
So I guess for us, the mission really was to create vehicles within the top 10 cryptocurrencies that gave the public retail investor access to the cryptocurrency market. Because right now it's a very difficult process for your average investor to access these markets. They have to go through an exchange, they have to set up hardware wallets, storage, security, all these sorts of things are quite difficult. Even in North America, where it's actually probably one of the easier places in the world to do it, once you move to Europe, the UK, Germany, it's actually very, very difficult to do these things. Most people do not own any cryptocurrency. They want to, but they don't know how to do it. So Troy and I came together and we had this plan. Okay, well, let's figure out a way that we can actually build an operating company, sort of a proof of stake model. Let's look at the top 10 cryptocurrencies, see what we think is one of the best contenders for top cryptocurrency out there going forward over the next 3 to 5 years. And how do we put an operating vehicle together, but at the same time allow people to ride that sort of speculative wave potentially by having access to a large pool of cryptocurrency. And so we focused on Dash. Dash is a really unique sort of setup, and we'll get into that in a second, but Dash allows us to essentially operate a proof of stake model, get paid for it, reinvest that income, and allow shareholders and retail investors access to that market through their brokers on book.
And so as of last week, now all Canadians can get into this because you guys are now listed on the TSX-V.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Yeah, so we're listed on the Toronto Stock Exchange under the ticker symbol DASH, D-A-S-H, of course. We IPO'd on, I guess it was last Monday on the 22nd. We did raise $20.7 million through a convertible debt structure, debenture structure back in December. So we actually raised it. What people don't understand is that we actually raised the money when Dash had rocketed to basically 1,600 coin. But really our average price is much less than that because we were buying it in November and we bought it in January. So we actually missed that peak, which was quite fortunate for us through our sort of structured procurement process. We raise money and we buy it over a sort of a 30-day period. So that IPO was quite interesting because the prices had pulled back, over the 3 weeks since we'd raised that capital. We saw a fair bit of selling into the market, which is understandable. Again, we are a trading vehicle. That's fine. I think we've weathered that storm well, and we're looking to add sort of accretive value for shareholders over the coming months here.
So Dash is now, it's top 10, top 15 coin, right around $7.5 billion market cap. Talk to me about why you decided to go with Dash.
So first off, we're very excited about Dash, and we think that at the time that we actually started the business, Dash was a top 5 digital currency. And just with the explosion of growth that's happening on all these different cryptocurrency exchanges and all these new types of smart contract platforms that have come to market, we want to highlight that it's not like Dash hasn't been performing well. It's been performing amazingly since we started the company. It's just that you see this meteoric rise in other blockchains like Neo, in Stellar, and Ripple that have really sort of like captured sort of like the hearts and imaginations of everyone temporarily. If you've been around in the blockchain space as much as I have, you know that you see these huge price runs and in different blockchains, and then they sort of come back down, and it's a lot of hot money almost jumping around in terms of what cryptocurrency is hot at the given time.
Right.
So we're very confident that Dash is going to maintain its standing as a top digital currency. Due to a number of reasons, right? So the first reason why we chose Dash was because we like the masternode model, which allows us basically to keep, I would say, 95% of our non-cash assets actually as digital currency. So that's a perfect exposure vehicle because we actually go out in the open market, we purchase digital currency, we keep it on our balance sheet, and we actually turn around and use that currency to generate more cash, right? Or as I'd like to say, more Dash. Digital cash. So so the payout ratios right now for a typical masternode is about 6.8 Dash per month, and the company is currently generating about 122 Dash per month, or about 125,000 Canadian dollars, depending on the day that you choose the Dash price. So the economic model behind Dash masternodes was the primary reason why we used Dash for this company. And the more that we explore Dash as a blockchain to assess if this sort of economic structure was going to work in the long term, the more we liked it, right? So I believe that your original question was sort of how we came up with Dash. The first reason was because the masternode economic model, it made sense from a financial investment perspective. And then the second reason is sort of like the technical underpinnings supporting the Dash blockchain that we're in very strong favor of, right? So the first thing is that Dash is actually the world's first digital autonomous organization, or DAO, right? And what a DAO is that it's an independent entity where the stakeholders in our case masternodes, can immediately vote on the disbursements of the company, right? And so Dash is really breaking new ground in actually successfully getting an organization up and running and actually redistributing a portion of the Dash block reward directly to the DAO. And it's up to the masternodes to make those very important governance decisions on what projects to spend or not spend that capital pool on, right? So we think that that was like a really interesting scaling solution that at the time hadn't been offered in the public market before. At the time, Dash had already been trialing it successfully for over a year, so we liked that. And then we liked the fact that the Dash DAO team was sort of like an actual professional team of people who ran Dash in a professional manner, right? So you basically have Ryan Taylor, who's the CEO of the Dash DAO right now. He's an ex-McKinsey partner, a very credible sort of like face and leader of the company. You have Evan Deffield, the founder of Dash, who notably knew that he might be a really good founder, but he might not be the best at scaling a global payment system. So Evan Duffield actually stepped aside to run Dash Evolutions, which is the payment processing and vendor payment processing model that Dash is planning to roll out in 2018. On top of the fact that there was there's 50 or 60 right now, it's changing so much, full-time employees that actually work at Dash that when you look at Dash's scaling roadmap are going to be sort of critical and fundamental to a blockchain being able to successfully scale. So at a 30,000 foot level, when you look back and you see, yes, a lot of these blockchains are good ideas. They're run by volunteer communities. How is a blockchain really going to develop globally? And our view is that the best way to do that is through a portion of block reward being redistributed back to employees or other individual stakeholders in the organization who can turn around and actually dedicate their full time to build that company, right? So imagine trying to start Google through volunteers, right? You can get it off the ground. It's a really great idea, but in order to get the best technical talent and the best sales talent, the best management talent, you're going to need to incentivize these people, with full-time salaries and some stability there, and Dash has done that. So when we looked at all those factors, it was very clear to us that Dash is not one of these sort of like trendy blockchains that are coming out recently with just a fancy white paper. It's been around for several years, has a very, very strong development team. They have a very, very large budget and a very, very clear roadmap and vision to scale Dash into something that we believe will be a long-term payment system for the future.
So Dash right now has a number of competitors. It seems there's hundreds of digital currencies in the space right now. Mm-hmm. Who are Dash's biggest competitors right now? Mm-hmm. What other currencies do you see that are building similar things to Dash? And where's Dash going from here?
Sure. I mean, I think that's one misleading sort of topic of the general public, that there's sort of thousands of these blockchains, which is true. If you go on CoinMarketCap, you can see all these different blockchains. But let's just be clear that 95% of the trading volume market cap is within the top 20 blockchains, right? So I think it's a bit confusing to the investor. They're like, well, they come into the space, people start quoting 3,000 different blockchains, but quite honestly, those blockchains don't really matter. Sure. From like an investment perspective. And so, from thinking about Dash as a competitive model and looking at what other companies, or I would say other blockchains, could potentially beat Dash that are in the top 20. I think that first off, we want to look at it and say there's actually plenty of, I would say, growth and market capitalization to go around. And each blockchain in the top 20 has its own sort of community and its own scaling strategy and its own philosophy. And I talked a little bit earlier about why we think Dash is going to be a long-term blockchain, because it's the only Dash that we could look at that's actually run like a professional corporation, that is organized and seems to make a lot more sense, and that it has a very, very clear governance structure, which if you talk to any blockchain expert is the number one sort of scaling issue for any blockchain is actual governance outside of like the external regulatory piece, right? And so, if I had to like look at other blockchains, I would say that, like the top blockchains can be put into two categories. There's currencies, where it's just sort of like sending value from myself to you, and then there's smart contracts, right? and they're two sort of completely different types of digital currencies. Blockchain, smart contract blockchains are meant to be built on top of, and currency platforms are meant to send value, right? And so in that respect, the competitive landscape from Dash relative to other cryptocurrencies drops by a factor of 2, right? And so you basically only have Bitcoin, Litecoin, Dash, and a few others. And the thing that's interesting about Dash is that Dash is actually run like an independent sort of private company with a very, very strong marketing budget and a very clear scaling roadmap that they're working hard on building out. And the other cryptocurrencies are actually basically been executed on a volunteer basis, right? With no clear scaling roadmap strategy and a very, very unclear sort of roadmap of where they actually want to take the currency. So we're very, very confident of Dash's positioning right now. There's a lot of volatility in the marketplace, and so we don't ever want to look at these blockchains and say Dash is number 12 versus number 5 versus number 3. This marketplace changes so much and so rapidly. We're looking 2-3 years ahead and looking at the technical underpinnings and the team supporting these blockchains and the scalability roadmaps that they've published. And we're very, very confident that they're going to execute on it.
And so as you're looking 2-3 years ahead, do you see any other digital currencies that you would plan on investing in the future? Or is this, are you building this out exclusively with Dash?
I think that if you ask any honest investor, they're going to say you should diversify your holdings. I don't know anyone that invests in the internet and said they should only buy Yahoo or one stock. Or if you're a precious metal investor, that you should say, well, I'm only going to buy gold and not silver, right? So I think there's plenty of opportunity for innovation and investment in the state in the space. We are big supporters of Dash, but I think that anyone would be disingenuous to think that they would only invest in Dash and Dash specifically, right? Anyone that's been in the blockchain space for longer than 4 months will tell you no one knows what's going to happen in the future. I certainly could never have predicted sort of like this altcoin boom that's really been driving prices over the last 2 months. Yeah. And so, what I can say is that I think that Dash would be a sort of critical and fundamental part of one's overall altcoin and portfolio, right? But by no means, do we want to be able to pick a leader just yet.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So tell me about the state of blockchain in Canada, because we've seen a number of public companies now come out in Canada, and we see this tech hub building for blockchain technology in Canada. Tell me a little bit more about your opinion on the space and where things are going in Canada.
Well, what's interesting about Canada is that it seems to attract a huge amount of speculative money to the Toronto Stock Exchange, Venture Exchange, and the CSE. So I think what's happening now is that we're seeing a huge capital inflow, not in fact just from Canada, but from all over the world into not only the blockchain space, but the cannabis space, AI space, that sort of stuff. So the spec stocks are seeing a great run up in terms of capital raising and valuations. What is interesting here is when we started Neptune Dash, we didn't see any real products that were similar in any way. So I mean, there's really a real lack of a product out there. So if you're an investor and you want to create a diversified portfolio in, say, the blockchain space or crypto space, you're going to have a tough time doing that because there's maybe 7 or 8 companies out there, and I'm sure in 2018 we're going to see many more. But we're talking in the world, there's probably less than 20 companies. I mean, most of the companies are actually in Canada on the Venture Exchange and the CSE, and most of those are mining companies, proof of work miners. And when we started this company, there was no pure plays, and I just got back from a road show throughout Germany and into the UK, and there really is no product. I mean, everybody wants to hear the story. Everybody's super fascinated by this stuff. They don't know how to get in. They're all looking at Canadian public markets, and where else do you invest other than the spec markets in Canada, right? Sure. So we're on a big promotion here to show everybody that we can make this work as a sort of a pure play vehicle. But there's also a lot of confusion in terms of how to value these things. Yeah. So a lot of these mining companies, we haven't seen financials come out for how the economics are working. So we're not going to know this till sort of a year plays out and how the economies work.
And you talk about how a lot of these companies just don't have products now, or a lot of these projects, they just haven't been built yet. A lot of it is hype, a lot of it is they've written their white papers and they have a backing, but there's nothing there yet. How long do you think it'll take for some of these to show up? Do you think all these companies are going to be able to deliver on their promises? What do you see as the future of this space?
Well, I think there's a lot of quality companies out there, and they're doing the right things, and they're great management teams, and they know what they're doing. I think the tough part about the proof of work mining is that there are so many assumptions to make the economics work, and we just don't know what they all are yet. And we're dealing with a super volatile pricing structure. So that sort of stuff is complex, and you really don't know how it's going to play out in the coming months. You know, what we've done here is we were like, okay, well, we need to have revenues out of the gate. We need to have revenues before we actually even list the company, so people actually can understand how the concept works. We've done a proof of concept, and now it's just a scaling exercise. And so we tried to keep it really, really simple for investors, because there's a lot of stuff out there that nobody understands. And most people don't have a great understanding for this space, especially your retail investor. Sure. So I think what we've created here is something quite unique.
If you're speaking to a retail investor, what is your one piece of advice to a retail investor in this space, given the confusion and the complexity and the hype surrounding a lot of companies in the space? What's your go-to piece of advice?
Well, I mean, I think you need to build a portfolio, and you want to have that well diversified through the crypto space and the blockchain space, and invest in management teams. Invest in management teams who understand what they're doing, that they've done it before, they have a track record of success, raising capital, building companies, and getting these things going. So I think if you invest in sound management teams, you'll probably do all right in the end, and you take a little bit of exposure in crypto, a little bit exposure in blockchain technology, some proof of work mining, some proof of stake companies. I mean, when they're out there, I mean, there's not much out there right now. So I think that's probably the best approach, and try and learn something about it. I mean, try and learn actually what you're investing in, because you know, it's hard to sift through all the data and all the assumptions in the space.
Okay, and so finally, one more question. This space has just been on a tear for the last year.
Yeah,
just
absolutely.
Straight up.
Yeah.
Is this too much? Is this overhyped? Is there something here? What's your take on that?
You know, I don't want to predict prices, because you actually really never know. It is a volatile sector, and it's very new. I mean, obviously this stuff's been around for 8 years or more, but really the massive run up is very new. It's only 12 months or 14 months old. You know, I see this as sort of a start. I think the pullback we've had over the last 3 weeks was very healthy. We had such a run up in 2017. It makes a lot of sense to have a pullback. It's just part of a healthy market. So I think it's nice. It looks like we sort of based here for the next leg up. Who knows when that's going to be? I hope 2018, and I sort of predict that maybe. But again, I mean, we're dealing with a market that there's barely any product. I mean, if you compare it to a competing market, say, I don't know, gold companies or mining companies, I mean, there's thousands of them. We're dealing with, like, maybe there's 10 companies right now. So I mean, Wall Street's just dipping their toe in, Bay Street's just dipping their toe in. I mean, there's capital flying into the system, but the product is not there yet. The vehicles aren't there yet. You know, we don't have a massive diversified space yet. So I think there is ample room for more rally in the future, and probably a healthy run for years to come.
Awesome. It's going to be an exciting 2018 for not only Neptune Dash, but the entire digital currency market. Thanks for tuning in. As always, like and subscribe, and we will see you next time.